Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hiring for Good podcast, sponsored by Acumen Executive Search. We are honored to have with us today Jered Stoehr, president of Milwaukee Electronics. Jered is a visionary leader known for his collaborative and customer-centric approach to business. With over 2 decades of experience in the electronics manufacturing industry, Jered has cultivated a reputation for fostering innovation, empowering teams, building strong, lasting client partnerships. His leadership style emphasizes transparency, adaptability, and continuous improvement, which has driven Milwaukee Electronics to deliver exceptional quality and reliable solutions to its diverse customer base. Jered's ability to align the company's operational strengths with evolving market demands has positioned Milwaukee as a trusted and forward-thinking partner in the electronics manufacturing space. Jered is a second-generation leader at Milwaukee Electronics and will be paying special attention to his experiences and wisdom gathered through the leadership transition process. Jered, thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome to Hiring for Good.
Thank you.
And then I will also mention, as usual, my lovely co-host Suzanne is here with me. I'm sure Suzanne has lots of fabulous things to say about Jered and ask, but we're both thrilled to be here with you. Before we kind of get into all of the leadership stuff, I think it would be really helpful for our audience to know just a little bit about what Milwaukee Electronics does and just a kind of brief synopsis of the company and then the company story. And then we're going to get into your story after that. So go ahead,
good.
please.
Yeah, Milwaukee Electronics is an electronics design and manufacturing company. We have about 700 employees and 3 factory locations, one here in Portland, our headquarters back in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then we have a factory in Tecate, Mexico, near San Diego. And we have about 180,000 square feet of manufacturing space, and then we have a couple of offices in Asia to support our North American manufacturing footprint.
Great. And I'm going to probably throw in some extra tidbits. Milwaukee also does an amazing job prototyping, working with customers from concept to completion.
Right.
And I think that's a huge benefit of.
Yeah, we have a kind of a different brand for the prototyping. So we were the first ones to create an e-commerce platform for prototyping and for engineers so that they could rapidly get their prototypes. So we've been doing that for 23 years now. And we do that all here in Portland, which is nice.
So you have the prototypes, you have the contract electronics, and then you have your own parts that you also manufacture, correct?
Yeah,
and sell.
And so we kind of have the prototype, and then we can do things domestically here. And then if the volumes get big enough and price sensitivity comes, then we can transition down to Mexico. We've never had a factory in China. We've always kind of been a big fan of Mexico, and it's been in recent years that Mexico's really come up as a place, kind of an alternative to China. And so at the moment, we're riding that wave, and that's been good for us because we've been there since the 90s.
Yeah.
Well, and how smart if businesses could have a crystal ball and see these decisions 23 years later. What a smart choice. Yeah, and really about hiring for good is about leadership. And so I would love to ask you about your journey, and especially being Gen 2. Share with us how you got where you are today.
Yeah, so I was an entrepreneurship major in college, and I had like the lawn mowing business and stuff in high school and college and things like that. And then right after school finished, I had the opportunity to come out here and start that e-commerce division. So that was really wonderful because I kind of got to flex all those entrepreneurial muscles and do that. And so I did that for 6 or 7 years. And at that point, I was in my late 20s and kind of knew I wanted to be in the business long term, but wanted to get some experience outside of the business. At times, I felt like it was a mistake that I went to work for my family right out of school. So I went to Asia for 7 years. Did a number of things there. Towards the end, I came back to the business and started our Singapore and India offices. So I got to, kind of put some of the things I learned over there to work for the company. And then around the time I had my first child, I moved back here to Portland, which is a beautiful place to call home.
Well, and I know this, and I should probably say, we've worked together for a couple of years now, but you have multiple siblings. Does everybody work for the company, or had they worked at one point or another?
Everybody has, but it was mostly like high school jobs. So, we actually, when my parents bought the company when I was 5, we had 22 people. And at that time, things were so tight that we did all the janitorial services for a number of years. So my brothers and sisters, we'd go in on Sunday afternoons and empty the garbage cans and stuff like that. So we've all been around the business, but as adults, I'm the only one that has stayed in the business. So it's just me, which has kind of made things clean and easy in some levels. So.
And then I'm curious, so, it sounds like a great fit that you had the chance to kind of run your own brand, underneath the company label, and then go get all these other experiences. So at the point that you came back to the company, what was the journey to now being the senior leader?
Yeah. So we had our VP of sales was retiring, and that was kind of the thing that triggered it. So it just aligned well for me with having our first kid. So I moved back and moved into the sales role, which was a huge shift in what I had been doing. I did a lot of sales when I was working in the e-commerce division. So, and I consider myself, to be a salesman primarily. But so I came back and was in sales for 6 years, and then 4 years ago became the CEO.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think we learn more from our mistakes, or, when these formative experiences happen. Share with us some things that you've really learned over this big career, whether it's at Milwaukee, when you left, when you came back.
Yeah. With that e-commerce group, after 6 years, it had grown pretty aggressively. And so by the time when I was about 27, it had outgrown me. And I was not the right person to be leading that anymore. I was, still in my 20s and very light on managerial experience. And I read a book by Adizes. He was like a really popular consultant back in the 80s. Corporate life cycles was this concept he created. But I got familiar with that and just realized, I'm not the right person to lead this anymore based upon the size and the number of people. And so it was good time for me to step back from that and just kind of get some life experience. And then after I came back from Asia, when I was VP of sales, I was on the executive team for the first time and sort of learning about all of that. And things just move more slowly when you're at that level, and you have to be more patient and kind of choose your battles. So I had, one moment in particular, I saw this issue where there was a lack of ownership on innovating with the Screaming Circuits, our e-commerce group, innovating their product offering. And so I wanted to bring product management to our organization. We didn't have any product managers. And so I spent about a year selling that to the executive team. And that was a very difficult and slow process for me. So that led to a lot of difficult conversations. Fortunately, I did get that opportunity to do that, and that has really, I think, helped our organization increase our rate of change in terms of bringing a better and better product to our customers. But that was, just one where I was reacting strongly to things, getting frustrated, getting impatient. And so there was just a lot of maturing with that one.
Well, in your industry, you talk about these life cycles, and your industry as a whole has become more and more commoditized. And a lot of competition, especially, 15 years ago, seemed like there was a lot of mom and pops kind of coming in, and then they're getting bought up. How have you kind of kept up with all of the industry changes?
Yeah, when I graduated in 2002 from college, and so that was the time when everything was going to China. So like that whole stretch was really tough. We've always been what we call like a high mix, low volume company. So we never really did the big high volume stuff. That was the first stuff to go over there. So a lot of our niche kind of protected us. But then that was when I started that whole prototype group, because the thinking was, okay, maybe the high volume stuff's going to go, but the prototypes, they're not going to do those overseas. And if we do them really quickly, with all the time it takes for FedEx or UPS to fly across the ocean, we can always have a time advantage.
Yeah.
So that was part of the rationale for starting that. And then the Mexico facility was our alternative to China. So for companies that had intellectual property concerns or other concerns, that was our solution.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Again, in hindsight, what wise decisions?
Yeah, not my decisions.
Yeah.
And so the question for me is now, crystal ball, look forward 10 years, 20 years. What is going to be that next place? What are the things we need to be doing today?
To prepare for the unknown, right?
For whatever those next shifts
exactly.
are.
It's always the rub.
Yeah.
It takes real vision.
And I look at that vision as people, as part of that strategy. It's not just what and where, but who's going to help you get there. So to kind of circle back on the leadership part, I would love to hear some learnings on that piece of how do you manage different, or how do you lead different through, again, this whole transformation of Gen 1, Gen 2, employee. Yeah,
that's been an interesting one for me. So I've been in this role for 4 years, and I really think that my job is about living in the future. If I'm working on today's problems, we're going to be in trouble pretty soon. I need to be working on tomorrow's problems, and so that's just a fundamental thing that an expectation I have for myself in terms of what my role is. And with that, there's a fair amount of anxiety when you start worrying about all these big global trends and things. So for me, emotional intelligence, or just self-awareness, I guess, more fundamentally, and working with that anxiety, because some anxiety is a good thing. Some anxiety straightens your spine, gets you out of bed a little earlier in the morning, helps you bring your A game. So there's like a healthy dose that I try to maintain just as I'm, going about things.
Yeah.
So that's been a big part of it for me, because I took over in January of 2021, which was about 10 months into COVID.
Wow.
So it's been a very dynamic time. And so there's just been a lot going on. A lot in our industry in particular. I don't know if you remember, but car manufacturers were shut down because of electronics.
Right.
Our industry in particular, everybody had a tough time, but our industry in particular was really struggling.
By the supply chain
The
stuff,
supply chain side just went, stuff that nobody had ever seen before, 52, 104-week lead times on parts. So we had a very difficult road, the whole industry.
Yeah.
So it's been just a dynamic couple of years.
I'm sure. Were you planning on taking over leadership at the time that you did? Or was this part of like a planned out transition and you stepped in, and then the unplanned stuff was COVID and supply chain? Or was it a little bit more of a, unplanned transition?
Yeah. We made the decision about 6 months before we implemented it. So we had made that decision the summer before. And then, unfortunately, my dad got diagnosed with cancer like the month before we announced it. So we made the decision in like July, August, and then in December he got diagnosed, and then we announced in January. So it was a lot going on. But we were intentional about that, and even well before that, we had been working with someone who specializes in family business succession for like 2 years before that. So it had been a good long road. I mean, and it sounds all nice and neat and planned. I mean, these things are very difficult and complicated.
Yeah.
But we'd been, devoting time and energy to it. But it was evolving, just kind of as these things do.
Yeah, and we've talked to other organizations that do the transition, and it's interesting because you devote who you are with what we do. We kind of identify that, and the ego and having to let go, and I'm going to say this to all the business coaches
on the part of the retiring CEO.
All the great transitions really do have that outsider to help coach to let go, to bring out down the egos, and to say this is not a battle you should be fighting, let it go, or what have you. And it sounds like that really helped in this.
It's definitely a hard thing. My dad was the CEO for 36 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like his fifth child,
Oh, I'm
and so yeah, having that really helped bring some consistency, and it created a little bit of accountability for both of us. And yeah, it made a really huge difference. And I think it was like the fourth or fifth person. We looked at a number of people and finally found a person that really had influence with both of us. I think that's the challenge, is someone who can really speak to and challenge both parties. It's a deeply personal thing.
Yeah.
Well, and you've used a lot of great words, whether it's humility, high EQ, on your leadership style. And it's these values I think these leaders bring, and it, kind of gets pushed down throughout the organization. But share with us some of these values that you really do try to operationalize in the organization.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for me to give a succinct answer on that. I mean, I think it's really a lot of my dad's values. He really set the tone, and the word that I use a lot is just care. I think care for others and care for our people, genuine care. It's such a simple thing, and sounds so typical, but in the family business world, those relationships, the people, it's really what it's about. I mean, that's the example that was set for me 100%. We have anybody who makes it to 25 years in our company gets a secret red envelope with an undisclosed amount of money that they cannot share or talk about with anyone. Their picture's up on the wall. We bring their family in. We have a big celebration. There's a lot of things that happen around people in a family business, and so it's a unique environment, and I think that's really the heart of it. So yeah, that's the word that I use the most is care.
Well, and it's interesting, 700 employees, and you still refer to it as a family business. I was going to
say almost the exact same thing. I'm like, at what point is it? I mean, it's a large company now.
Yeah, there were years when every person in our employee got a handwritten note from my dad, for example.
Wow.
Just like stuff like that I'm just like, how did he find that time?
Wow.
It's amazing to me.
That's actually like a perfect segue into one of my next questions, which was, how did you balance respecting your dad's kind of legacy and practices while implementing your own vision and leadership style? Like, how do you navigate that process?
Yeah, I think philosophically, people say, oh, you've got big shoes to fill, right? That's something we've all heard a bunch. And, the way that I say it is, I get to be my own person. I'm not here to fill his shoes, but I'm here to walk the same path.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I approach it. I've just lost my train of thought here, so give me a moment. Honestly, I think we have a ton of alignment on those values. So there haven't been a lot of moments when I feel very conflicted on the value side of it. The stuff that we had challenges on was like, how much should we invest in IT? He was an older generation,
right,
and that wasn't as much of a thing. But
yeah,
for me, huge
sure,
part of how I approach things. Like, well, what are we doing from a systems perspective? The information, because I've grown up, in the information
absolutely,
age. So we've had a lot of that stuff. If there was something that we have just had a difference on style-wise, I would say I really have tried to bring more vulnerability into the organization and more candor.
Mm-hmm.
For me, those two things are really, really important. We're a 71-year-old company. There's a lot of stuff that we do that is out of date. There's a lot of things we do great, but there's plenty of things that we need to look at critically and modernize those things. And to have that perspective, that critical eye, we need to be candid with one another about what's working, what's not working. And for people who are in different parts of the organization, there's some vulnerability to that, to raising a hand or challenging. So those are two things that I've tried to create more of in my role.
Well, and not only was there a transition with you and your father, but you look at the leadership team, and there's been a lot of transition to where, like you said, people have been with your organization 25, 30, sometimes more than that years.
Yep.
And looking at building the next level of teams, and what do you value and what do you look for when you're looking at this leadership change?
Yeah, I really value versatility. So we encourage internal promotions or people applying for different jobs. So we've got a number of different people that have maybe had 5, 6, 7 roles in 10 or 15 years. I can think of a person who has had a number of different roles. At one point in 2015, we were having some really hard times. We were doing some layoffs. This person's position was being eliminated because we couldn't afford it. They took a night shift supervisor role for about 9 months or a year. And now they're kind of back in a similar department. But I really value and appreciate people who learn different areas of the business, because over time, then they really understand a lot of different parts of the company well, and they develop a really good sense of judgment and understanding. So I really try to encourage people to take on different roles and move around the company. And then we also have an executive development program. So we have 7 employees currently in that program, and those are people that are being groomed for future executive roles. So we get together every year and we provide them training and do a lot of stuff for them to get to know one another, because they're going to be that next generation of leader.
That's great. And was that something that you implemented, or has that been around for a while?
That is something that I implemented
Yeah.
After I took on this role. So that's been something, one of my passion projects for sure. And it's been really fun to do that and, see those people, growing. And I think for them, everybody's felt really honored, obviously, to be a part of that. And we've tried to add a little bit of swagger to it for them.
Yeah.
So it's been a really nice one.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you talk.
Well, this podcast is called Hiring for Good. So we always finish up with, what does hiring for good mean to you?
Yeah, I think, the thing that I heard from my father over and over and over was take a long-term perspective. As much as you can afford to, take a long-term perspective. And I think in a family business, you can do that. You have that freedom. And so when it comes to people, taking that long-term perspective and see people beyond just whatever their immediate role is or their immediate sense of productivity. And, that brings in that whole concept of caring and just caring for that person in the 70 to 80 years of life that they have and whatever journey they're on, doing what we can for them while we run a business. I think that's what it's about.
Well, that's beautiful.
Thank
you so much for being our guest. And it was just such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I know our audience is going to really benefit from your wisdom.
Thank you, Jered.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.